Hello, everyone. The theme of this week is exploration, and I want to start by recommending two books to you for you to perhaps read during this period of lockdown. The first of those books is a book by a modern explorer called Benedict Allen, and it's called The Faber Book of Exploration. And I know it looks like a huge and intimidating book, but actually fascinating and very readable. And that's largely because he takes all of the world's great explorers and he writes about the journeys and adventurers in a very condensed and accessible way. He quotes from their diaries and extracts that were written about them. So for those of you with an interest in exploration, it really is the book for you, because you can jump in and out, you can go here, there and everywhere, pick a random explorer you've never heard of or a remote random part of the world you might know nothing about, and learn just a little bit more about it over 2 or 3 pages. So it's a really good book to have on your shelves and to read. And the second book is a book that is actually mentioned in that first book, and it's this book. And that is, this is called Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by Lansing. And it is, without doubt, one of the most exhilarating and extraordinary experiences, stories, true stories of human exploration and endurance that has ever been told. And I have absolutely no doubt that if you haven't read it, you will really thoroughly enjoy it. And in many ways, there is no better time to read this story than today, because this is a time in our lives where we need as much courage and fortitude and endurance as we can possibly muster. So Ernest Shackleton was an Irish-born merchant naval officer. He was a member of Captain Scott's first expedition to the Antarctic in 1904, and then subsequently led his own expedition to the Antarctic in 1907. And that 1907 expedition was actually an exploration that was itself an extraordinary achievement. Not many people know about it, but he actually came within 97 miles of the South Pole. He came really close. And remember that the South Pole wasn't discovered until 1911 by the Norwegians in that really famous race between the Norwegians and Captain Scott. Anyway, in 1907, on that occasion, when he came within 97 miles of the pole, he had to turn back because of really bad weather. And that return actually was an extraordinary race. He called it a race against death. And by the time he got back to his base camp, he was left with just a few cups of hot drink and a couple of handfuls of grain that was left. If it had taken any longer, he would have almost certainly died. So it was an extraordinary expedition. Anyway, after that famous race to the South Pole, which didn't involve Shackleton, that was between Scott and the Norwegians, and that led famously to the Norwegian victory and to Scott's death in Antarctica. Shackleton decided in 1914 to take a 27-man team on a new expedition to cross the whole of Antarctica by sledge. So they wanted to cross the whole of the continent. And they set off in a boat called Endurance. But on reaching the Weddell Sea, which was one of the seas around the edge of Antarctica, they were caught in sea ice. It's an enclosing sea ice, and this is the surface of the sea, a thick layer of ice that can catch and trap boats. These days they have things called icebreakers that can plough right through them, but in those days they didn't. They were wooden boats. And so it was caught. And this was the real beginning of the adventure for Shackleton. And actually, that first stage, Shackleton, in his Endurance with the 27 men, were left in this boat, drifting, stuck in the ice. And unbelievably, they were stuck there for 11 months. Can you believe that? 11 months, just stranded with each other and nothing, just nothing all around them in the middle of Antarctica. And it was a huge, huge challenge on Shackleton's leadership to keep spirits up, to maintain the morale of his crew. It was an extraordinary effort. And then after that whole 11 months, so nearly a year just stuck there, the sea finally took the ship. It started to break it up. They heard it smashing and going. And just imagine what that would have been like. Their one source of safety just devoured by the cold Antarctic water, except for they managed to rescue the lifeboats off the edge of this main ship. And they had to drag those lifeboats across the ice, and then eventually they reached the shore, the edge of the ice, and decided that all they could really do was to embark on a sea journey in the lifeboats, which was itself extraordinary. And so they did it. They took the lifeboats and off they went, and they ended up on an island called Elephant Island. which was all very well and good, and it had been an amazing, extraordinary, and difficult journey. But actually, Shackleton then realised that really the only way that they were going to survive and come through it was if they tried to reach South Georgia. And if you thought that the journey to Elephant Island was bad, the journey to South Georgia was something else. It was an 800-mile journey in the world's most treacherous seas, and really awful seas, enormous, great big waves. But Shackleton realised it was the only way that they were going to survive. And so he took 5 others. They boarded one of the lifeboats and they set off. And he described it in his diaries as being like a jumping flea through the waves. It was an 800-mile journey through just awful, awful sea conditions. 16 days to complete it, so they were at sea for 16 days, and incredible navigation for the time. But eventually they ended up there in South Georgia, exhausted, except for there was one problem. They had ended up on the wrong side of the island, on the uninhabited side of the island. And so they were left again with an unbearable decision, which was that they had to just pluck up any strength they had left and cross that island, cross the mountainous interior on foot to get to the other side. And they unbelievably did that too. And eventually they did reach a whaling station, which was on the other side of the island where there were people. And from there, they managed to get a rescue party together and go back and get the rest of the party back to safety. It's a really extraordinary story about an extraordinary group of people led by an extraordinary man, Shackleton. And I really do hope you will read it in full. And when you do, let it maybe help you through these next few weeks. Think about just how tough life became for Shackleton, for those men trapped on the ice for 11 months, for those who were at sea in the world's worst seafaring conditions in a lifeboat. And when they all felt like they'd nothing left to give, picking themselves up and hiking across that mountainous Antarctic island. So, when you're exhausted by all these challenges that life throws at us, I'm a great believer that there is always more in the tank. The human spirit can always surprise us through its perseverance, its courage, and its resolve. And I know that this time asks that of you, all of you, in real abundance. I absolutely know that. And so I wish you well with it. And I offer you every support from St Dunstan's, and the staff are doing everything they can to offer you as much support as they can this really difficult time as we navigate the choppy waters of coronavirus, just as Shackleton did the choppy waters of the Weddell Sea. So it's really nice to talk with you. I hope you have a really good first week back with remote learning, and look forward to being in touch in due course.